Now that is a really lovely interpretation, Miriam. I love the sense of uh, melodicity and the kind of natural sort of pastoral kind of a feel that you got going. I love the way that you use very simple colors in really effective ways. I just love the kind of village poetry. There's a lot of very cool things. Yeah, it's a shame that you didn't have enough time. Maybe you ran out of time to do the entire sonata. I only got half of the movement from you. It would have been really cool to see how you contrasted this opening section from the E part going on from where I had indicated a rehearsal mark of E, and how you addressed the development section and so on. Yeah, like I've heard, by now I've witnessed so many different orchestrations and interpretations of this material, and I just don't get tired of it because seeing everybody's personalities, like the more it's repeated, the more I see the wonderful individuality of each orchestrator, and I see a lot of that here. So congratulations. Now, there are a few things that stuck in my mind, and I'm really afraid that I'm going to forget them. Okay, so, and these were places where like you had departed a little bit from like the harmony or from the notes of the original. Um, so, uh, I mean, not totally, but yeah, there are just a few things, and I'm gonna try. I'm gonna come back to them and talk about them more. But I felt like right in here, there could have been a little bit more. There could have been a little bit more harmonic support for this descending line. Bum bum bum. Yeah, and then just right in here on this F chord, it just I could barely hear just because of the architecture. Um, yeah, I could barely hear this mediant here. Maybe it was the mock-up. All right, and then there wasn't too much connection between this beautiful solo here. I didn't feel that the first violins really connected what was going on the very beautiful spicy sound of the oboe here to the flute, right? An octave higher. Yeah, just especially with the strings kind of burbling along below, the flute just felt like a very sudden introduction. And then, of course, like right in here, this could have been a bit bigger. And there were some kind of strange, like the bass didn't seem to quite um, be right in here. So on this bar, and then there were some you did like some reharmonization here, but left out some other harmonies. All right, and then in here, like we've got our little mini cadence right in here. And then you left out any support to this line right in here. So these might just be, things that you forgot to do, or you might have thought, oh, it might be kind of interesting to have no support in this area, or and so on. Okay, so those were just a few things. I'm really afraid that I'm going to forget after having just reviewed your piece again for the fourth or fifth time. Okay, so now let's play fair, though. Having mentioned all those things, let's jump back to the beginning, and I'm going to give you as much time as I possibly can. Um, you know, I don't know if we'll get to a full hour here with just these three screens, but let's see how much help I can give you, and so on. Okay. First thing is, I really love this opening here. The little pizzicato double bass below, and the cellos, and so on. In situations like this, I think that you can just you can give us a quarter value with a fermata over it. Perhaps you needed to do this in order to get the correct response from your mock-up, but in terms of actual players, it's sufficient just to mark a fermata on a quarter note value, and then they will just wait for the conductor to do the lift going into the next bar, right? And this should be a double bar, absolutely, right? Because you're going between two different realities, right? Two different approaches, like 2/4 to 4/4, or it would be the same thing as if you changed to major sections, or if you changed between key signatures and so on. But yeah, but I like the fact that you ended with this little harmony here, right? So let's talk about it, with the the horns and trombones working together, this big, beautiful, rich sound, and then the trumpets coming in as the horns become more subsidiary to the trumpet and so on. And this is really lovely right in here. Da, 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 da. Just if everybody keeps it really soft at the beginning, I think that it'll work great. And you could add a little bit of crescendo here going towards the end, and a little bit of ritardando as well, right? You're saying adagio cantabile, and I mean certainly adagio. You're saying adagio, eighth note equals 72. So I would say, it would be better for you to say quarter note equals 36. Okay, because like you're assuming that the conductor will be conducting eighth notes here, and if that is the truth, then you might as well increase the value of everything, double the note the note value of everything by 2, and then score this in 4/4 time, right? Right, so half note and then dotted quarter note to eighth and so on, right? But I don't think that that's required. That players like this, symphonic players are used to following very slow very slow tempos, and especially if they've done a little rehearsal, they know where it is, and even moving very slowly, the conductor can show them where the middle of the bar is and so on, and they from there, once they've gotten the downbeat and then the upbeat, they know right where the dotted rhythm is going to fall, right? So no need to indicate the eighth note. So this is quarter note equals 36, and that's perfectly fine. Okay, then here, allegro monontroppo. I think like here you give once again, like I feel this is an inappropriate metronome marking, right? Don't tell us a half note if you don't have cut time, right? So half note equals XYZ would be more appropriate in cut time, which is also known as 2/2. If you see 2/2 on some scores, it's the same thing as cut time, or 3/2, right? Or 4/2 sometimes, occasionally in some older scores you'll see that. So that in that case, if 2 is where the beat goes, then you would be telling the conductor. But there's no way that a conductor would conduct this in 2, beating like just slightly faster than once per second, right? They would be going, 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. They really want the players to know where the tact is for each of these beats, and then they'll be able to control it, right? Now, monontroppo, it's another thing. You're going up to essentially what is 1/26, to the quarter note, right? Which is what you should mark. It kind of is starting to make less and less sense. Like there've been a couple of entries that were like 138, and were still marked allegro monontroppo, and I would say like that's like at that point you're just playing allegro, right? So there's like the monontroppo makes less sense. It still almost makes sense at 126, but like I would just say 120, or like between 112 and 120. I would kind of say, 112, I'd say allegro moderato, and maybe 116 to 120, maybe 124 or something, or 23, maybe allegro monontroppo, and then above that, just plain allegro, right? So at 126, you're right on the, you're right between where I would say, I would just mark it allegro. All right. And then here you've got like nice long bows. Then here you go to bowing by the half bar and so on. Now, if you've been watching me evaluate other people's scores, then you probably know already that I probably recommend just, that this approach is, you should just be applied everywhere, right? So if you have this, da, da, like, down bow, up bow, and then just do the same thing here, down bow, up bow, down bow, up bow. And then this could also be divided the same way, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, right? And it just makes perfect sense. It's just so much easier. The bow is very regular. A lot of people think, oh, regular, doesn't that mean it's predictable and boring and mechanical? And no, it does not at all. Having regular bowing just solves one problem, and that, from there, you might not even realize, like, you might not even be thinking where the division of bow is, only when it's used for a particular inflection, to add a little bit of emphasis to the middle of the bar if it's needed, right? So, now, let's think about the orchestration, not just the mechanics. Okay. Does the intro set the mood effectively? I think it does beautifully, right? This is sort of it's kind of, it's kind of neo-romantic, right? Because you are using English horn and bass clarinet, right? And you've got chromatic horns and so on. So it's not really period, right? So but is it really is it of the period of, say, like, would Berlioz have been orchestrating? Or if Berlioz orchestrated, would it sound like this? Maybe. Or would it sound more like somebody neo-romantically imagining Berlioz or Schumann or Mendelssohn or so on, maybe even Weber of that period orchestrating it? That's what it feels more like to me. But but more than over and above that, what I feel like is it's Miriam orchestrating this, right? So so with certain instrument choices and certain types of textures, we're just kind of abandoning the idea of the pretense. It's not really pretense, but the affect of trying to figure out how Beethoven would sound, right? And there are touches that make it sound authentic to the to the style in terms of the phrasing, right? Which I think is all we really need in that case. But I think all the more reason for us to not, if you're reinterpreting the harmony, that's great, but don't leave out certain harmonies that he has as well, right? Just like, don't go to a unison where he had a harmonic third or something, some other kind of thing, right? Okay, so having said all that, if I'm going into kind of really microscopic detail on certain things, it's just because I'm trying to fill out, more of your time here, just to because you support it at this level. I want to give you all the feedback I can. All right, so all that aside, does the melody start with elegance? I think it does. I think it's really beautiful how you start in the first violins, and you got these. This back and forth harmony going on, this kind of figuration with the middle strings, just very simple cello, below, and then you have the horns come in, and then things expand outwards beautifully. So is there a natural flow to the accompaniment? Yes. Is there a natural transition to octaves? Do you expand without clogging up? Yes. All right, so I feel that that this in particular is very strong. How you approach this, the kind of like internal pedal, right? Us being in the key of F, and having kind of the Fs hang on below and in the middle with your F horns, and and clarinet and so on, and even a touch above with flute. So that's really a lot of this is things that I imagined, like the potential, looking at the score years ago and thinking this would be great for an orchestration challenge someday. So a lot of this is things that I just feel like I feel that it brings out the meaning of the phrase so beautifully, the way that you use those things, right? And then the way that you've scored the oboe below the flute, adding its resonance to the flute. That's a nice trick to keep the violins from completely swallowing it, right? There are a bunch of different ways of getting around the kind of resonance thing, the disappearing flute problem. And I love the thirds right in here. Just so many things to like about this. All right, so you are diminuendoing down to pianissimo. So I think that if you are going down to pianissimo because you want this to all be really soft, and I think that these markings also deserve their place in other parts here. Okay, just like everybody should have the same idea of where they're going. All right, now we're going to the next issue, which is does this little statement in here, the leggermente, does that contrast with the theme? And it does, because the main theme here that was stated was violins, right? So now you've got it clarinet trading off to bass clarinet and so on. So it just all stays very clarinet-ish here. You don't contrast between the lines, just between, and in fact, it's more homogeneous this way when it's all clarinet sounding. And you are, my little question, do you need harmonic support? You've added it with these repeated notes here in the strings. This is like the first instance that I've seen of this particular combination. It's just wonderful how many different cool ways there are of interpreting things. Now, you may have seen me scolding a few people in the past about not putting the word leggermente in here, and, you should put leggermente in there, okay? Because it's like you might think, well, what's the need of that? Maybe it's just something more for the pianist than for, say, the wind player. But I think that it's very, very much for any player that would be taking on these particular little melodic fragments, because they need to be told, look, I really want you to express a kind of nimbleness, a kind of dexterity, a kind of virtuosity, right? Just like yada-da-da-da-da-da-da. Also, this thing just burbling out from Beethoven's imagination, right? So, just want you to express that with just the most precision and the most, it's almost like him chuckling. It's like, hey, I was got ready to take this walk, and wow, I just was so expecting to have a wonderful time, and I got out of Vienna where things are smelly, and I got out into the countryside. I was really enjoying myself, and then I saw this old guy walking down the road in the opposite direction, and his shoe was falling off, and I said, hey there, my chap, I'll give you a florin, and you can go fix your shoe. And he said, what shoe? Right? Something like that, just like he saw something really silly, and like he's kind of chuckling about it a little bit, right? And then, the whole feeling of the countryside in his, just like it all culminates together, and he's just feeling great. This is sort of a period of Beethoven where he had these wonderful. He was experimenting, like you see it in the Sixth Symphony and a couple of other works between the Sixth and the Eighth. This Sonata and a couple others around there, and some of the later quartets and so on. A kind of ingenious, virtuosic simplicity. Just he is expressing things in a direct way that is like the absolute height of imagination and taste, and it doesn't have to be hyper intellectual, right? But he's using his great mind to paint pictures in ways that we'll never forget, right? And that's what I feel is so powerful about this whole sonata, right? It's of a piece with that. Now here we go to This so a duet flutes, that's all perfectly fine. It'll give a nice fat, back up to the violins here. You're saying a duet clarinets as well. It'll make this incredibly intense. The second violins and the bowing here, I completely approve of. Up, down, up, down. So, do you want it to slur though, right? Would it be kind of cool to just go down, up, down, just so you really get that ending of this phrase, right? Now, here you're going pianissimo here, and then this is piano, and it's just really unclear, like piano crescendo. I think that you should add piano here, right, so that we're all together on this new dynamic reality. Okay? Now, the issue that I mentioned before is very, very important, and that is something that I even have in my evaluation criteria, right? And that is harmonic density setting up the following bar, right? And so I just feel like it just needed more, like, you got some oboe sitting around doing nothing. Or, you got bass clarinet and you've got bassoons. The bassoons could be doubling or supporting, or, there could be maybe a little bit of double bass in there. It just feels thin here. It just feels like there's so much more emotion you could get out of this bar. And just by adding a little bit of harmonic density. And the other thing, too, is I don't think it's sufficient just to go piano, crescendo, subito, piano. I think that you should decide on arriving at however big you want this crescendo to be. Tell the players what it is. Like, is it going to be mezzo forte or poco forte or whatever, but it should be marked here by the fourth beat. Right? You can even do it right in the middle here, or by the third beat or something. Just like really push forwards. Give us the dynamic that we're going to head for, and then subito piano makes a lot more sense. Now here, like, I can see you're going sub P and you're stacking it like this so that the player who's sight reading will immediately see the fact that it's subito, and like, the little extra effort that it takes to read past the marking will not be a big surprise, and they won't muck this up, right? That's the whole thing. It's just to, like, not so that, like, people don't automatically just put in a diminuendo at the end rather than just letting the crescendo go to the logical conclusion, right? Considering though how this dives down and then walks upwards, like, just sometimes the very act of walking upward a couple of notes, 3 notes in a row, in itself adds intensity. So maybe the crescendo doesn't need to go to the end, right? Maybe you could just go to a fixed point and then subito piano here. Right. Okay, I've added all my justifications. I think it's rather lovely the way that this has all been scored here. Flute on top of clarinets, and then we've got the octaves in the violins, and then it's kind of the little opposite direction here with bass clarinet and viola. I think that the viola needs a little bit of love, right? Maybe the viola could be doubled by bass clarinet, and the cellos could be doubled by bassoon, right? Or 1 or 2 bassoons. And maybe if you want to go subito piano, you could go to, like, just a single flute here rather than a duet flute. And if you were to follow my advice of adding some instrument that would double the viola, maybe that could be just a single bassoon added to double the cellos, like I mentioned. So, so this is nice. Subito piano and then crescendo. There's a few entries have done this. Dun, dun, da, da, dun, and then diminuendo. Da, da, dun, and just those little touches of timpani in there are so great. Okay, and yeah, and this is really lovely. Just adding winds on the outside, right, over the top in our flute family instruments, and a little bit of these lower winds, right, supporting below, and that leaves the sound of these strings kind of in the middle of the picture, just kind of more pure, more unadulterated, and that's really nice. And that also serves the sound picture really well when you get this set up here going into the B section. So altogether, like this whole A section, I feel like, with some tweaks, I feel like you could get it to a level of perfection, right? Just very, very easily. All right, so going on to the B section. Fresh new color, right? We have solo oboe for the first time in this whole piece, and I think that it works beautifully. And just in general, like the way that you're varying the quality of timbre in all of the entrances is great, right? Horns stating the intro theme, going to trumpets, first violins, gradually getting expanded by other colors on the main theme. Then the little leggermente theme in the clarinet family, then a sort of a kind of a very modest tutti here in mixed winds and strings. And then when we get to like the B melodic statement, going to once again a fresh new color. Da 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 da. Yeah, and a complementary timbre in clarinets, just keeping it very simple, and then just background, kind of a background pad. This is scored as if you intended to have a note here and then you forgot to put it in. All right, so put it back in. Right, and then here we go to da-da-dum, 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 da-da-dum. Yeah, and this is kind of an ingenious solution here, but just like I mentioned before, you have this very bright, very pungent quality of color here, and it doesn't really connect to the next one, because this, you're going diminuendo into piano, but the problem is that the string color, with the way that this pattern in the violas and second violins surrounds this melody note, it's just not powerful enough to hand off, to make a connection with the flute that follows. Do you see what I mean? So and I love this. I love the little contrary motion here in the clarinet family, and all this other stuff. I mean, there's some cool things, but I just feel you need more weight on this. So if you had, let's say if this had dovetailed into the English horn, all right. And the English horn still stayed soft at around piano. It wasn't intended to do anything but thicken the first violins. So let's say that this dovetails out into the English horn, and then the English horn is playing unison, supporting the first violins, and then walks up to here. Then I think that the flute coming in here wouldn't sound so random, just sort of sudden. Like what? Why is that suddenly there? What purpose does that have, as opposed to da da dum bum bum? Do you see what I mean? So it just doesn't I almost feel like, and you could even have a little crescendo there in both English horn and first violins, and then drop off to pianissimo, right? And I would also put the pianissimo here, even though the functions start here, but the pianissimo can start earlier, right? Yeah, and this is all fun. Right in here, no notes on that. There's zero need for you to change to the second flute here. It's not going to make any difference to the player. They can sneak a breath here or here, right? So they don't need to be trading off. And in fact, just in terms of timbral quality, it is really better for you to just have the same player will be completely in control of the same line and just sneaking a breath here or there, right? Okay, so here I feel, if you had, let's say you made a really good start on your first screen, and then you were working on this, and you did a bit of work on that, but you kind of felt like you needed to expand this a little bit, then I can completely empathize. Yeah, so it's a situation here where I think that that if you're, since, I mean, you have pretty much all of the pitches that are in the piano part, right? So I can't say, oh, well, you're leaving things out, more or less. Um, but in terms of the drama, right? I feel that it doesn't quite wrap up here, right? So there was a lot of room in here for you to gradually add other elements, maybe doubling the cellos here, maybe a little snarling on the horns on the little G sharp, and then relaxing to G natural. Maybe there could be just background harmony in general, kind of pushing towards the resolution here. Maybe the bassoons could be doing a little bit of support of the double basses and the cellos right in here. Perhaps some of the middle winds could be supporting this da 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 da. Maybe clarinets trading off right there, right? Or English horn and oboe, or there's just a bunch of different options that could have led to a very colorful, beautiful tutti right in here. So just don't be afraid in the future on situations like this. Use your imagination. Do you know what I mean? It's like with these, like it's almost better to send me something that doesn't exactly work, and then have me say, well, it would the X Y Z, this would work there, and then that would, and then you just know, right, next time you approach that. It's better to do that than to just leave a completely blank canvas, I would say. But like if you ran out of time, that's just a completely other issue. Here, I would say a big fat trill on, let's say that this is just a single clarinet. That is not enough with what's going on here. You could go divisi in your violas, and you could have like the upper divisi violas trilling along with with your first clarinet here, for instance, right? That would be one way of dealing with this, say. So I'm not going to be too critical of this or pull this, pick this apart too much or whatever. But, just, I'm sure you could have done more with this. And, I mean, obviously from listening to that first screen, and I think I've seen some other entries from you and so on. So, like, you got some talent there. I think you could do it. So there was some reharmonization right in here. There was a few changes here which kind of ended up not really being quite yeah. So anyway, just like I would say, go back to, if you're gonna come back to this, just go back to what Beethoven did, and then just like be careful not to leave out any particular things. Okay, but I mean it's kind of cool to just go back to just straight strings here, stating it, and then as you push towards here, right. It's kind of lovely, just the way that you've approached this. I especially like the clarinets here. This could be slurred, right? Bass clarinet and bassoons working together. Right, and then having first clarinet come in, and then huge tutti here. Bum, 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 no notes. Very, very, very spicy piccolo. The way that everything is positioned here. And then I like the bass clarinet and bassoons working together with the lower strings and the timpani under the flute here, dovetailing over to the first violins. Here I would say, to make this dovetailing feel a little more convincing, just have this be a 16th note, right? So it's no longer than the duration of the first violin, and it'll really feel like a handoff from one color to the other, much more natural, right? And then here, you didn't use up the kinds of instruments that could have supported the English horn here, right? This could have been supported by violas and second violins, plus maybe clarinets and bass clarinet, right? That would have been a beautiful color to support this, and it would have been different from what happened before, correct? So maybe this is just a part that you forgot to put in. I'm noticing a lot of people well, a lot is maybe pushing it. Maybe this is the fourth or fifth entry that I've seen where, the first little mini cadence got stuck in the accompaniment, and the second one got left out. Right? So it's a little weird, but that's all right. Or you could have had the support just in the horns, right? Yeah, and then I love the little backup of horns as the cellos do their business. And this is a good repeat, except for one little thing. See, here you got the da 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 bum bum bum. But what's happening here? Da 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 dum. Oh, yeah, I guess it all works fine. Yeah. Right. Yeah, and I'm just so I really regret not getting the second half of this from you, Miriam. But I still think that that it was really, a lovely entry, and there's, yeah, like I said, just don't be afraid to just throw things at the wall and let me figure out if I can help you find a way to make it make sense, right? It's no subtraction from your talent or your identity as an orchestrator or anything like that. But just I really love this. I love the feeling the most of all, right? Just like you seem to me like you never quite got away from that. You never abandoned. Even when things got left out or things could have been a little bigger or whatever, you never abandoned a certain kind of poise is the wrong word, a certain essence, like a certain outlook. I felt that was very individual and really refreshing to listen to. So, and to listen to as I look at the score and hear it in my mind. So wonderful. Once again, I wish I could say, oh, please, next time I have an orchestration challenge, please contribute if you can. Please participate if you can. But I mean, at this point, I really don't know with my health. Maybe I'll bounce back next year and I will be running around and, back to my old self. I couldn't wait for that. I mean, I can't say how much I would like that to happen. So anyway, if it does, I would really love to see you there. So thanks so much for being so patient with me and letting me get my health together. And I'm so glad that I was able to come back to it and take a look at your score. So anybody who has been sitting here listening to me blab for the past 40 minutes or so, please tell Miriam your thoughts below. Please give her some constructive feedback. And Miriam, if you get a chance, there are some really great scores I think that you would enjoy looking at, and even just giving some people some encouragement under their videos would be a great way of keeping this community together and for people to get great ideas from each other and bounce off each other. And that's really what it's all about. So thank you, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow.